Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, continuing my build here of the Estes Optima Pro. Now, last video we worked on the fins a little bit to get them most of the way ready. We're going to finish that process, but there are a couple things I want to do first. And, this is kind of serendipitous, I think, the order in which I did it. I didn't really intend to. But we haven't done anything with the launch lugs or any kind of system to get the rocket attached to a rod or a rail. So we need to do that. I neglected to do that because I forgot, honestly. But it actually worked out quite well this way because I did fill all the spirals here. At least I made a decent effort at it. And I think it's probably best that I didn't put the launch lugs on before because it's a whole lot easier to do it this way, honestly, to be able to fill everything and then put the launch lug in. So anyway, before we do anything else, I did sand the tube kind of generally. There are a couple spots like this. I mentioned that one of these upper fins kind of slid down with epoxy all over it. Well, there's a little bit of epoxy goop there that's probably not coming off. But I did generally sand this. It needs some kind of spot sanding though, because like right in here I can see that I can still see like brush marks. So this right in here didn't quite get sanded adequately for a nice smooth finish. So this is kind of hard to see unless you happen to have a light shining directly on it. And then you can see the brush marks or any other kind of inconsistency. So I'm just going to quickly go over this and look to see if there are any particularly obvious spots that are not smooth. And I'm just going to spot sand them. And I did, like I said, I did sand this in general, but that doesn't guarantee anything. So, plus I did it, apparently when I did it, the light wasn't quite as, well, it was different anyway. And there are some spots that I can see in the current lighting where I'm seeing these, like I said, brush strokes that I didn't see before. I typically too would get a rag or a sock or some kind of cloth and get rid of this dust afterwards. Alright, that looks, I don't see anything obvious anymore, so we'll get rid of that. Alright. I did, way back when, I drew two lines on this for the mounting system. So I am going to put both buttons, rail buttons and launch lugs on this. The one blew away when I was dusting, so we'll put these on first. The instructions say that this should go, let's get my glue out here, one should go like right at the end, and the other one should go 1/2 inch from the end. So that's easy enough. I'm not going to bother measuring the 1/2 inch. There's not really any reason to do that, I don't think. So I'm just going to get some glue. I'm going to just do one layer, I think, but I am going to take the time to spread it out a little bit. Let's actually move that. I don't want that yet. This is the one that's going to require some precision, right? So 1/2 inch. I'm going to just put it right there. And I do, of course, I want these need to be lined up, so I'm going to try to do this rather quickly because as soon as I get the other one on, I need to make sure that they are lined up, because if they're not, well, kind of worst case scenario is you wouldn't even be able to get a rod on this. A slightly better case scenario is you can get a rod on it, but it's crooked, and then you would end up, it wouldn't fly right, of course, if it's going up the rod crooked. There's a little spot there that the brush strokes, I can now see them as well. That's better. Alright, and I do want this basically flush with the end according to the instructions. Alright, so I'm just going to look down the barrel this way. They look pretty good. Check the other direction as well. Yeah, as far as I can tell, they look pretty good. I mean, you can have a look. Maybe you can see better than I can. Yeah, you probably can't see it just quite. You know, if I have it lined up, you should be able to see straight down from one to the other. It looks pretty good. All right, now the rail buttons. I'm gonna let this, put it out of the way for a moment while I talk. These, pretty much have to special order these. These allow the rocket to use a rail, which is it's a much better option than a 1/4 inch rod, honestly. It's much more rigid. They tend to be longer, so you get more guidance. And they're more aerodynamic. Now, I'm putting both on, so I'm not going to get any aerodynamic benefits. In fact, this is going to be a bit of a cost. But that's okay. This part's going to go inside the rocket. This is the button itself, and then they screw together like that. So in order to use these, I need a hole. So eventually I'm going to drill this. I'm going to get a power drill. But for the time being, I am going to use, I got a push pin. This will at least mark off where I want to put these. And I'm not going to put these on until right at the end. Now, this rocket needs to have a coupler that's going to go in here, right, like so, and then the next body tube is going to come out here. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to finish this. I'm going to paint this completely. Then I'm going to put the buttons in, and then I'm going to put the coupler in, and then I'm going to attach the other parts to it. There's a lot of reasons for it, but one reason is depending on how you want to paint this, which color scheme you want to use. This section's supposed to be one color, either black and white, and the next one up is supposed to be not black and white. It's supposed to be the other color. So I'm going to paint these separately anyway. Now, the buttons, this is a pretty small tube. I can't get my fingers particularly far in it. Maybe a couple inches tops. This is going to go halfway, and on top of it, you know, this flange part is a little bit wider. So let's put this up for a moment. This is I believe this is 4 inches long. Yeah. So I need to go 2 inches and then another, let's say half, because I don't want to try to drill a hole through this if I can help it. So I want to put the rail button, you know, like I said, 2.5 inches down the tube. Now I did draw a line, so that'll make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to pack these up so I don't misplace them, because I don't really need them right now, just for demonstration purposes. Anyway, where's the other line? Here's the other line. So the one is easy enough to do. It goes down here at the bottom, and I want it kind of centered. Like right here is where, that's not quite it, it's about there, is where the engine mount, the motor mount ring is. So I had to go about here. And I'm just gonna punch through carefully. And again, this is just like, it's like a pilot. It's a reminder of where things are, and I put it more or less on that line. Then the other one, I need at least 2.5 inches. Button that up. So 2.5 inches on. So much clutter. Declutter my life here, I guess. 2.5 inches is going to be approximately there. Now, I don't know that I can reach that far in, honestly. I don't know. With any accuracy, with any strength, I'm hoping I can. This is where I frequently farm out a little bit of labor to other people around here who happen to have smaller, more delicate hands. Children sometimes, or my wife, whose hands are much more, well, they're less hammy than mine. So I'm going to punch the hole here where I want it to be, and hopefully that'll be good enough. Now, the other thing is, you know, if I screwed this up pretty wildly and that's no good, ultimately, you know, if I have an inch or so in this part of the tube and 3 inches in the other, it's not great, but it's ultimately not going to hurt anything. So The holes are punched. There, one seems to be a little bit on the near side, and the other seems to be a little bit on the far side. So I'm going to drill these out anyway, so it's probably not going to be perfectly centered one way or the other. I'm just going to try to center it on the line when I drill it. But I'm not going to worry about that, at least not in this video. Alright, now the remainder of the work, at least for now, is I'm going to put a layer of sanding sealer onto the fins. Now I've sanded these down. They are pretty smooth, one would hope. This stuff is basically paint. So I'm going to brush it on. I suspect I'm going to need way more than that, but this is at least a good place to start. It's, you know, no harm of adding more. And I'm just going to paint over everything. You could, if you wanted to, paint the tube as well, because I did put stuff on it and I did sand it, so it wouldn't be the dumbest thing in the world to put this on the tube as well. And sometimes I just use this as a way to fill the spiral, but I don't think that would be adequate for this one. Oh, well, I messed around with that. Fortunately, the glue is set on the launch lugs, and my foolishness there did not affect anything. Anyway, this is going to get sanded off too. This takes a lot longer to dry thoroughly than the wood fill that I used in the previous step. So this is going to be like, it needs to sit and rest for a day, at least a day, probably a couple days before I sand it off. And then I hardly ever do it. I really probably should. I probably should go back and do another layer of wood fill. Certainly I should if it's balsa. I hardly ever do because I kind of get impatient with this part because, I don't know, this part just seems to take forever, real time. You know, me brushing this stuff on the fins, yeah, it's quick. It's relatively painless, but then I have to wait and wait and wait. And then I can sand, and then I can add another layer, and you know, it is time consuming. Yeah, this might actually be close to the amount of the sanding sealer that I actually need. It's going to be close. And again, if I need a little more, it's not like the wood fill that I need to actually kind of make from scratch. This just gets squeezed right out of a bottle, so that is easy enough to do. Do be careful about getting the stuff on the edges. You know, it'll go around the corner if you brush to the corners. Don't leave it there because you don't want big old gloppy messes on the edges. And again, this is, I mean, it's a liquid, so you should probably just follow best procedures or best practice and paint one face and then immediately flip it over and do the opposite face, just in case. It's very unlikely that this big, thick piece of plywood's going to warp, but you know, better safe than sorry. And yeah, like there was a big glob that came over the side when I just painted that one. So do check for that. It's not the world's worst idea, you know, brush the top as well. That's not a terrible idea. Alright. A little bit more. I probably would have let the launch lug completely dry, you know, for like an hour at least before I did this. Had I really thought it through, but I didn't, so I'm concerned that I'm knocking it, but it is pretty well set. I'm sure I could snap it off at this point because the glue is not completely set and cured and all that, but it seems to be pretty durable at this point, and I haven't messed it up yet, even though I have gleaned the whole rocket on the launch lug, which is not the smartest thing I could do. Alright, one more face, and I know that this is not going to be adequate, but we'll use what we have, and then I'm going to need a bit more, because that's only going to cover about half this face. Come on. There we go. Yeah, that's better. And this is another, like, if you end up squeezing out too much, then it's not a bad idea to just put this on the body tube over the spiral, and then sand that. It's not, this stuff does not work too well, honestly, to get rid of spiral, but it's a good step to do in between if you were going to put multiple layers of wood fill on, which again, I probably should more often than I do, which is like never. Virtually always do one coat and call it. But my finishes aren't the world's best. And this is again, it's your rocket. I've known people who are truly master painters, and their finished work is just really impressive. And that's what they like to do. So if that's you, then great. I'm duly impressed. But I've also had people who never paint, I've seen people who never paint their rockets at all, or say, yeah, I will paint it after it successfully flies 3 times. That's like, one guy that I've flown with is like, this is how I christen my rockets. They have to survive 3 flights, and then they have earned a coat of paint. So, hey, to each his own. You do you. Alright, so that's all the fins painted up. There's a little bit left. I don't think I'm going to bother putting this on the fins. I'm just going to smear it out. And then wash my brush. Alright, so next phase, after this dries for several days, I'm going to sand it, and then I'm going to paint it with spray paint primer. That takes like 3 or 4 days to completely cure to the point where you can sand it nicely. I'm going to sand that, and then I'm going to paint it. The painting should be pretty easy. I'm going to go with the alternate paint scheme for this, which is black on this part and white on the rest. So by the time that the next video happens, it should be like 2 weeks from now in real life, and I should be ready to attach the decals. Well, we'll see. Alright, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.